The truth is that I was asked to make an introduction explaining on having us the question that Alexander has just proposed. The idea of interdisciplinarity in education. As I am not a specialist in anything, I am interested in trying to give us some sort of a sense to the concepts that we use in general. The idea is to provide sense to the concept of interdisciplinarity within the health problems. That would be the first idea. Obviously, this is not a conference, a keynote speech, or academic conference, but I will try to use some ideas that will allow us during the course of this week to go deeper in the purpose of the course, of this course. My intervention can be classified in two parts. But I have a small defect that I speak a lot, I talk a lot. So you will have to tell me when to stop because I could speak the whole morning and this is not possible. In order to have some discipline, I have two great topics in our discussion that could be reduced to two words. First of all would be reflection on epistemology, on interdisciplinarity, in a very light manner. Simply making questions and providing some hints to work. And the second part, I had some sort of an effort to see how in a given situation, in which we have to prepare a strategic plan, how could we think in terms of a group? Let's say that this group this morning needs to prepare a plan of action within the framework of health in a complex situation, and how we could do this action plan or prepare it. I will give you some ideas how to work on this, and to a certain extent, in my experience, this is more or less what I have observed and which I use for the other types of situations. This is going to be the idea of my discussion. It is a discussion, really. This is not a course, a discussion on certain topics. This is the framework. Then there are some details. These details, I hope, will cause you to make comments. I made a presentation. I did a mixed presentation in French and Spanish. My Spanish is quite poor. I have been living in France for 38 years. I am not thinking in Spanish, I think in French. So sometimes it's very difficult for me to express myself in Spanish. So please forgive any mistake. And also, this is the typical excuse of the academician. Regrettably, I had not enough time to make a proper presentation. That is true also. So I could have done a better presentation in good Spanish with good pictures, but sometimes there is no need to have so many sophisticated issues. Let's see. Epistemologic challenge. The first idea, I would call it an epistemologic challenge. And in order to generate a commitment, because I believe we are in such a situation in which everybody, all of us, have to provide, to continue progressing, searching for a commitment in order to be able to have a dialogue among us. That is the idea, the first idea. Interdisciplinarity is a dialogue between, let's see, between disciplines or among disciplines. It's not my boss, but the people with which I worked a lot of time in the past. He's a French philosopher, Moral. He always had an image. Uh, we were not in agreement in the idea of interdisciplinarity. For him, it was the first lowest level that could provoke dialogue and knowledge. He said that interdisciplinarity is um, like a meeting of the United Nations. You may well imagine what he meant by that. You may have the image of that. Then he, to a certain extent, to a certain time, he didn't consider interdisciplinary as the first important step to understand the complexity, the real complexity.
So for him, the basic thing was to actually go to transdisciplinarity altogether. I'm not going to be addressing in transdisciplinarity because we need a proper previous preparation. Previous preparation should be made so as to be able to discuss on this whole concept of transdisciplinarity. It's not something that is light. It's deep and that it entails a sense, a theoretical sense, epistemological sense also. Therefore, for me, interdisciplinarity, we were in disagreement because it's kind of a first way of not minor of being able to set up a dialogue. The fact of dialoguing different between disciplines, different disciplines, and not only dialoguing and conversing, but also trying to go beyond the disciplinary borders, which is also very important, and it's not a minor issue either. Let's imagine destabilizes and challenges many principles. Keenly, and here we are all encompassed, we, the ones who have a basis in terms of monodisciplinary training. So now it's a full difficulty to be able, as of a monodisciplinarity, to try to leave this monodisciplinarity and go towards actually transdisciplinarity, and this is not issue, and it's an easy issue. Secondly, and I think also is a very important topic to approach, there is a confusion and there is a misunderstanding when we actually talk about transdisciplinarity. There is a way, let's say, of judging that our objective is, at the end of the day, our objective is the elimination of the discipline itself, and it's a fake judgment. It's wrong to be able to be interdisciplinary. In essence, you have to be disciplinary first. Is this the basics? To transcend if not disciplinary, definitely I would have the necessary conditions to be able to advance towards in transdisciplinarity. What is it they're going to be sharing? What is it going to be sharing? Again, he says. And here we are talking about sharing knowledge. For I to be able to share knowledge, I need to have a basis first. Also, I need to have a basis and a solid basis, a solid foundation. I was trained in sociology. My first job was a general sociologist. So I had a basis in sociology, and I knew about the big authors of sociology. In my training then, I went in deep in my sociology, and and I studied other issues in sociology. I was a majored and I understood sociology in order to dialogue with my colleagues that come from anthropology or come from other areas of knowledge actually based actually in human science. Up till then, up till there, actually things are easy to understand. Up till that point, things are easy, kind of easy. And let's leave it there because things are going to be complicated later, and things are going to be going to get much complicated. We are going to transcend to other borders or frontiers of knowledge into other areas of knowledge, which are not closely related only to our origin. Actually, our original training, when we are going to be needing to set a dialogue with our colleagues that come from the science, from biological science, that come from, let's say, physical science area and other types of fields of action, things are going to get much more complicated. Even they're complicated because the researcher or the professor of human science, also researcher and professor of science itself, they do, let's say, have a difficulty in being able to share and dialogue on their principles, conceptual principles, or their principles, theoretical principles, in order to set up a dialogue with others. I would call it that there is a barrier between these two areas of knowledge. Also, one day we were in a meeting just like this one. We were discussing exactly the borders and limits of transdisciplinarity. There was a colleague of mine that got up, and he likes to draw. He has this talent to draw well, and he went to the blackboard. He went to the blackboard again, and he made a drawing. He designed a river. He drew a river. He drew a bridge, and then he put interdisciplinary as a word in the bridge. And at the entrance of the bridge, he put 3 or 4 characters that wanted to pass through the bridge. And who was going to pass first? Who is going to go first to cross the bridge? It was an image very interesting to me because the bridge is the way on how we can have this idea of transversality to also crossing to the other side of the river, which is a border or a frontier to me. How can you surpass this border, disciplinary frontier? Then I would say that that we have to search for this interdisciplinarity. What are, let's say, the actually the guiding principles that will allow us to also what are going to be the first idea that will lead us to what I call an awareness raising of the need of integrating this type of principle. And then there is an issue that is not minor. Again, actually, it is something that can be widely discussed, and that I call, very simply, the difficulty of being able to reorganize our cognitive structure, be it reorganize actually our thinking structure. And our cognitive structure or scheme is formatted towards a situation actually into a proper training. This is a big issue in France, let's imagine, in which the country, in general terms, since I got into France 40 years ago, is still facing a crisis in education. One we have the problem with the professors. One another day we have the problems with the youth. All the crisis of the problem with the ministers who don't know actually whatever. So always there is a problem, and a minister that comes to France in the different governments also wants to make a reform. In that case, you need to have a reform. So each one minister has its very own reforms. If you take the situation in France in terms of education, since the 60s, also there is a reform, an ongoing reform, and each minister who comes along wants to make a different reform. So I be the group who are working also with other people. We are, let's say, one of the actually the thinkers. We said it's not a problem with a reform. It's a reform that is going to be transforming the ideas and the thoughts of the different players and actors. What we have to do, what we have to do is more than a reform, which is actually a cognitive revolution. What we should actually take onwards, and and otherwise you can make every reform you want, but the results won't be positive. Well, there might be something we can have actually administrative reform, and that's all as far as we can get. In quoting quote, here we are here in Latin America, brothers and sisters. Also, we have to make a self-criticism because many times, as managers, we do participate in these reforms. We are we are actors and participants. Actually, we want to have reforms that make a certain sense. Actually, it's a political sense, but not a public policies. Actually, in terms of efficiency. Well, this here is a representative of the Chilean administration. I'm going to send a message to Chile through her. Please don't record this for the records. The administrative reform, that's all they're focused in. Now, within this scenario, what is it that what can bring us to interdisciplinarity? What can deliver us interdisciplinarity? And let's say also what can facilitate the way forward? Here we are talking about being able to have to be able, let's imagine, to have this instrument which is called interdisciplinarity, and at the same time, with a double function, which is a function that I call epistemology, to have as a backdrop of the thought within the field of science. Epistemological, I mean, in your case will be the science in health, but also at the same time as a methodological instrument. Let's imagine how this same strong principle can allow us to build a new methodology that at the end of the day will prompt us, which is the whole idea, will prompt us to install two fundamental principles, which are extremely simple. I'm not inventing anything new, but it's worthwhile recalling them. There are two. One is cooperating, which is not minor. Cooperating is key. And secondly, generally is something that which is overlooked, which is a very important notion, which is also basic, which is confidence, cooperation based on confidence or based on trust. Those two principles within the sphere of action of interdisciplinary practices, these are two, both principles are to be followed and complied with intelligently. I guess that also we will have been able to advance. Cooperating means to be together, working jointly, collaborating, exchanging, actually within an atmosphere of trust. In the academia, this is very difficult, I can tell you. Cooperating, I always repeat this, and the truth of the matter that it shows cases our system cooperating actually with respect, because many times we cooperate but to be able to defeat the other one, and to be able to englobe, to amass more power, which is very important for us to be able to have, actually, to be stronger in cooperation. And this is not the idea. The idea is to cooperate, to be able exactly to advance together, actually, without hurting each other, without actually destroying the other or taking more power. This is, and yet another point to be added, in the whole idea of cooperating with greater participation. This is something that is widely known by all of us. More than anything else, is an agreement, is something that has to be recalled. And here we have an idea, global idea down below, on the screen, locating us, our framework, locating ourselves in the scenario in which we move. The world or the scenario is not a metaphor of the world, or the world that today we do share. For me, the world has a much more mission. It has a new vision. A world for me is a vision. We have a vision that we have of the world. That's the world, a vision that we have of it. We know very well that we are in a world today, and I think that I wrote this because this is what happens in Europe. We are in constant transformation, actually, in a world where there is disturbance and distress. Unfortunately, also they cannot be analyzed differently. The problems that we have are very complex, and what I'm saying is true. And it's not just rhetoric when I say that it's a real complexity in all of this, because I know what I'm saying, and I know where I'm putting the accent of complexity. I'm not just talking about the fact that before, because the problems are hard to resolve, that they're complex. No, quite the opposite. This is complication, not complexity. I say complexity in the sense that the world today is a world of interdependence also. Yet another element in which interdisciplinarity has to play a role. And above all of this, and beyond all of this, and this is not trivial, because also can be, we have an interdependent world. Our world we live in is an interdependent world and a global world we live in. When I say global world, I'm not talking about globalization as a simple idea. As we have been talking about 20 years, is a different perspective I bring to the global essence. Global for me is an idea in which we do not know how to integrate the issue of interrelations and interactions and interdependence through interdisciplinarity or through transdisciplinarity. We won't be able to interpret what is global, or it can be actually interpreted very lightly. The global world in which I locate myself with my vision. What is my, now I open quotes, what is my target in my goal in our course that we have in the university. It's a course based on our global, also thinking global, the global idea. And thinking global is a new challenge towards the different disciplines. How disciplines can think global, and from what moment on disciplines can, let's imagine, contribute towards a true global thought, not only the disciplines of social sciences, but also the disciplines of science themselves. How can we set a dialogue between anthropology of cosmos and cosmology? How can we can have a dialogue between biology, in sociology, in health, and also we have to set up these links and conversations in order to establish collaboration through a global vision, or through a vision of what is global. I'm sorry, the gentleman is not used to the mic. We cannot translate the question. Oh, this is a time of, we are in a new era. Let's imagine here. We are living new times. There are two things that for me are pivotal. In the first place, actually, the new era that has come along will be located in a period. Actually, for historians, let's put two big periods of time. The first period of time, let's imagine, starts at the end of the 30s, early 50s, in which we see the appearance of new sciences, for example, the theory of relativity, cybernetics, systemics. Well, it's a whole array of frameworks in science that will lead towards an evolution, an important evolution of science, and not only just one single science, all sciences. Here, there's a shift, an important shift of a period of time in the world, in the history of science, because we see there are important challenges to be posed. Oh, I wanted to give you two examples, only two examples I want to pose, that also give way to a discussion that can last for hours and hours. A shift in the paradigm, a paradigmatic shift. Paradigmatic shift has a stronger reflex also in physical science. The whole concept of time and space. And as of, let's say, of the 40s, we see the abandonment of science, of the notion of time, and the importance of the notion of time and space. We have abandonment of time, and also the highlight of time and space. This is a period of time that is, for me, the world changes the vision of the world, whether we see the emergence of new theories and new paradigms, also new scientific paradigms also come to life. What Thomas Kuhn says, we are entering into a period of scientific revolution. Then there's a second change or shift which is important for me, which is what actually points at, and it's not minor also, or neither, because at that time it didn't have actually the impact that it should have had. It gave way to a lot of discussion and controversy, but 50 years later we consider that it was actually was a fundamental moment, which was the actually important report of the Club of Rome at the end of the 60s, early 70s. The famous report again of the Club of Rome on how to stopping the growth creates It's not actually a revolution creates actually very important scientific discussion or dilemma. 50 years later, we realize that, let's say, it was actually the moment for a change.
Why? Because we are questioning the model, the dominant model that we still have today, the model of dominance we have today. This is a topic. I don't want to go to other topics, but this is a meager topic in which it is obvious that if we don't have the capacity of interrelationship, the different phenomena that allow this transformation, if we don't have the possibility of being able to manage this idea of interdisciplinarity, this goes away, and this is something completely complicated to be understood. But if we see the case of the Rome report on development and growth, you see the research, and at that time, the manner in which the group had worked was an interdisciplinary model. It was a modelization on a modelization of complex systems in which there was health, agriculture, geography, demography, economy, ecology. You see, the projects, they were the topics that were needed and that we need to which we have to analyze in terms of interrelationship, interdependence, interdisciplinarity, but through the complexity of the system. Okay? We already said this, we're not going to repeat it. The problem involving teaching, research, which are solidly related to interdisciplinarity, and this has a problem. And the fact that disciplines are always the structure, the main structure, that, as I said, it is important, but we are not taught that. We are told that it is important, but also allows us to go to other fields of knowledge having a strong basis. And here I am more or less getting near to which I had mentioned before. How is it that the interdisciplinarity can be seen through what I call the public policies? How interdisciplinarity is a challenge for the preparation of public policies, for the devising of public policies. And in your case, public policies in health. I was using here public policies in science. I went beyond, but this would be, I would say, the purpose of all this, having a vision towards a challenge in order to devise public policies. This, which is not what I call the blockages of interdisciplinarity, that is to say, here we see several types of blockage in which this is the moment now to say that if we don't have not very clear that the blockage are important to go forward, if they are first the blockage involving relationship, if there isn't an attempt or a will in cooperation, eventually the relationships among us will not work properly. So if there is a blockage, we have to overcome the problem involving relationship among us. Second, it is also important, and we can see this in the world of the academy, which is the institutional blockage. In the world of academy, the institutional blockage has a lot of strong problems because the institution promotes interdisciplinarity but doesn't give the institutional conditions to be able to practice interdisciplinarity. It could also be something, how could I say, a paradox, because at the same time we are asking for a institutional recognition in the academy, and this may be a blockage. For example, we are asked, we are encouraged to have interdisciplinarity from an institutional viewpoint, but we are to be judged according to by our professional life. Who is going to judge? Our disciplinary peers. You understand? So we arrive to the moment of the evaluation of the institutional assessment, and our peers are disciplinary. What do you say? This is not sociology, this is anthropology, so you have to go to the other commission on anthropology and you go there. This is not anthropology, this is health sciences, then go to the health sciences, and that I'm going around, at the end nothing. So, there is a paradox. We are searching for institutional, but at the same time we have a blockage in the institutional. The second important problem for the world of the academy, but it can also be applied to the public administration world. Public administration wishes to apply innovative principles in order to be able to leave behind the status quo, and is going to send their people to send people to Rio de Janeiro for a course, but when they came back to their places of work, the institution says, no, you cannot apply that here because this is not within the framework of the institution. So why is this course useful? For what? And the third point, you may see this in our academic world, Alexandra can say it, this is a testimony for us. I was her professor. I said to her, do interdisciplinarity, but the problem is afterwards. How come Alexandra and John and all the others will be able to go into the academic world in which the discipline predominates? And we don't feel well here. The teacher doesn't feel well because at present, and I say it honestly, I do not recommend anybody to do interdisciplinarity in the university. You may think this is absurd, but I am very honest and sincere. At present, today, it is impossible. Who does interdisciplinarity? Ourselves. That we have already history, we have a path, we don't suffer from outer problems. We don't need to prove what we do to anybody. We publish with problems, with difficulty, but we publish at the end of the young people cannot publish. And there is another problem in the publication. There is an institutional problem also. The institution, there are no interdisciplinary magazines, there are just a few large science magazines. I have been looking for to tell you that I'm also a serious person. When Alexandra invited me, I tried to see what we had of new in interdisciplinarity and public health. I went then to search. We have a database in our university, and we may see all the magazines in the world. So I went to the science. Which magazines can publish interdisciplinarity in the area of health? And you may find some interesting things from the viewpoint of epidemiology, the great policies in public health in relation to the problems of health, of global health, because you have to see health from a global viewpoint, not only from the local viewpoint. So those blockages. And a course like this, obviously, it is important and relevant for you that leadership in your countries. It is important to push and also to change the tradition in which everything that is new may be a problem and bring conflicts around that prevent the transformation or the change of an organization. Therefore, as I said a few minutes ago, to make interdisciplinarity is really a challenge. And this is a challenge even more. This is a challenge in the world of bureaucracy. I believe that congratulations to this institution, which has this idea of breaking the barriers with the topics that are not day-to-day topics in bureaucracies. Alessandra, what about time? Okay, I'm okay. Now, why isn't this device working? Now, okay. Now we are going to see the most concrete thing. Let's see this. So let's say that we now come to the challenge. And in the challenge we have to have three things very clearly in our minds. First, the vision of the world. The friend, the colleague asked us, and that vision of the world, or world vision, is essential and has to have some sort of contextualization, because the world vision is one thing and the context is another thing. We have to contextualize why this world vision has incidence on in our surrounding. So we have to contextualize our surroundings. This is not an easy task. The idea of contextualization, for me, is an essential question. I am in the middle. When I say ourselves, sometimes we do not contextualize. On the contrary, we decontextualize in a certain situation. And we contextualize. It's not an easy question. It is an exercise that is highly difficult and has to be done with rigorously, because if not, we are out of focus, let's say it. Therefore, the first thing is the vision, and in that vision, the interdisciplinary vision has a certain sense. Second, how to make the articulation of the vision to the organization, how to come from the vision, the global vision, local, contextualized towards the organization that in which we want to implement it, because the organization has to have a coherence, a certain sense, intellectually built. So this is not an easy question. We are making an exercise which is quite serious and cannot be superficial. The reason for which I said at the beginning that we need cooperation. Alone we are nothing. Alone, yes, we may do something, perhaps, well, but not in this sense that I'm speaking. I need to cooperate, I need to collaborate in order to be able to build together a real transformation model. What we are looking for or searching is an organizational model that allows us to include what we are discussing now. And secondly, and thirdly, important issue in this challenge is how we articulate the different puzzles. How are we going to do it? Which are the interactions that must appear? Regrettably, I don't have a board here. Sometimes I use a flip chart, perhaps, in order to show you how we do this interaction of the different elements that we need to be able to prepare, devise a form of organization, because we are seeking a complex organizational form, interdisciplinary organizational form. We are there. And which is the organization? The complex interdisciplinary organization is the organization that will be able to contextualize the global and local areas and be able to show and evidence the relevance of interaction of the other elements that are part of the system. So we are now using the word systematic without great effort. Through the by mentioning interdisciplinary, we have several focuses that we may interrelate, that can be interrelated. Some water, he says. Now, how to make something concrete, not only ideas, how to go down a little, how to have some ideas. This will take us to a closing part of our conference. It can also have a publication. I sent you some texts, but I can have all this and have prepare a more adequate text for you. And here we are making things more complex because I believe that there is also a topic that is not a minor theme and has to have some sense and be integrated in our discussions, which is the idea of the inter, many people make a confusion between transversal and interdisciplinary. The transversality is a form of integrating more than infringing some discussion topics with other areas of knowledge. We have transversal or crossing objects, and we look for and we seek, after discussing the relevance of transversality of an object, we may seek for the manner, for the interdisciplinary methodology that will allow us to provide some sense to this transversal thinking. Transversality is also a manner in which we can promote institutions and promote the players about the relevance of having everything on the table without any kind of taboo. We have all the topics on the table. We see how we can make them transversal, cross themes. This is also a quite relevant exercise, especially for us who have topics which have very strong resonance in the area, in the aspect, and I haven't mentioned this, but it's in our heads, in our minds. We have to provide a political sense, a social sense, economic also, ethical. And we may have a list here of all this. That is to say, we have to show how all this is placed, is in movement through the idea of transversality. So, interdisciplinary methodology in public policies. We may develop a methodology for public action, interdisciplinary public action, I would say. I think that this can also be a discussion among you during this week. From your own experiences, how is it that the public action appear or emerge, having an interdisciplinary sense in the different countries represented at this meeting? And this can also be, and I will show it afterwards, this can also be done if there is money. Everything is done with money. Without money we can do anything. And using what I call the diagnosis as a methodology. It is important to make a diagnosis in order to be able to prepare actions, strategic action in public policies, interdisciplinary policies. I'm sorry for the interruption, but there is a topic in the language that I would like you to clarify, because I think it's something important. Are you speaking about you are speaking about something very important. How do senses, meanings, objects, concepts appear and emerge? Then we can also have a collective meaning that would be helpful to take us to transversal action or crossing action. Can we make them appear? This is my question in Spanish. The question of emergence is not very easily translated, and I would like to have it for tomorrow's presentation to explain the difference between making emerging and letting it emerge or helping to emerge. This is, yes, these are different meanings. The three formulas that you mentioned have different senses. To make emerge is something that I won't say it's spontaneous, but is something that emerged from a certain situation of a context in which the conditions make the emergence possible. If we have different compositions, this will result, or this will create, or will result in a chemical phenomenon, and this will produce the emergence of something. To make emerge is giving the conditions, creating the conditions. For example, we know that in a public action, if we, in a specific view, we get together for an action, for a public action, if we put together specific situations in the economic, social, health areas, evidently this will allow the emergence of something that will be helpful to assist us in resolving a problem. This is for certain. This is not that I say this. I think from the moment we have all these elements, they will allow the emergence of this. And then we also have the ideas of emergence from an epistemological viewpoint, and this is something far more in the sense that emergence has a meaning, a deep meaning of transformation that is practically, in order to give you a metaphor, is practically an important step to metamorphosis. It's more than a mutation. Emergence may be more than simple mutation. Could mean a metamorphosis. This process of emergence may bring transformation, of course, but this transformation could go beyond of a simple mutations and become a metamorphosis. This is the idea. I have 5 more minutes. Then I'm going to go quicker, just to give you some ideas which probably you already know.
I'm talking about public health and research. I bring this to the table because we do research. Also, in my profession, we can change the name if you wish, but I call it research. Perhaps you might call it an action plan, whatever you want to call it by. This also has to do with what we had said before. First, the whole idea of being able to put the professionals in health together in order to cooperate jointly. This is an idea which is universally accepted, and it couldn't be otherwise. Then the second point is less universal and it is more complicated. How can we optimize interdisciplinary efforts? How can we optimize this? What are the results? They will be transformed into what? And this is a whole issue in itself, a mega issue in itself, because we have to find a way of of after 2 months or 3 months of 6 months of working, then this had to be designed and also be put in practice to see what are, let's say, to talk about the bureaucratic point of view, what are the services that will benefit to optimize the whole system, which is the organizational system. This is what we're talking about today in face of a health catastrophe, because this is what we're doing. Tomorrow, we to say we'd be able to face a catastrophe, health catastrophe, through what we are implementing today. Is not sci-fi, science fiction. Is something that has to be previewed. You want to think on the future of public policies, we have to think on what are going to be also the big topics that are going to be moving forward the whole public system. Public system is not just doing management, actually simple management of hospitals, but also it has another type of responsibilities. I would say that part from the of epidemiology and goes towards the end results or the outcomes of, let's say, it goes until the outcomes of health policies to be designed for the full society. I only have 5 more minutes left for my presentation. This is another topic also, which is who is the one who's able or prepared to design a protocol, who elaborates a protocol, how are the protocols prepared. We need to have a protocol. It cannot be done lightly. We need to have a matrix, as we should put it. Then the protocol somehow is going to guide us through the process so that we can think on the implementation of interdisciplinarity. Who are the ones who are responsible for this preparation? Who are the actors that do the preparation? For me, if I ask myself and I respond to myself, is the ensemble of the group, the committee. We all have to prepare the protocol, all of us together. And for this reason, we go back to the first issue, which is fundamental, that we need to cooperate. So how can we prepare this cooperatively? Also, another important topic, which is create a team within the framework. We are trying to, I'm giving the steps as I imagine them towards implementation. We have admitted, we are all in agreement there. We know that interdisciplinarity is a must. We need within this process the diagnosis of a teamwork. If it's not the same group going to prepare the protocol, we have to start doing the diagnosis of the situation. Without diagnosis, we cannot prepare a coherent protocol according to the situation. We need to have the different necessary elements to be able to have the protocol well designed, or the matrix, if you want to call it the protocol or the matrix, whatever name you want to give it. This is something which is very important. And I said also around this idea that to have a diagnosis team, the diagnosis team has to at least be able to integrate it, what is interdisciplinarity. Also, the diagnosis team doesn't know what's the sense to be given to a disciplinarity. Well, or the speaker was bad, or the students were not paying attention, but we have to have the clear idea. We need to actually to overcome our confusions. We have to understand things clearly. We have to be clear-cut actually in our understanding. I only have 2 more minutes left. I'm going to skip this altogether. Yes, it's an issue yet. And then again, which is basic for me. within the issue of diagnosis, also when we talk about protocols that I call the expertise. It's hard for me to find the full definition of expertise in Spanish, but it's not the expert, it has nothing to do with it, but are the people, the group of people that can make a diagnosis, a truly efficient diagnosis with all the elements of an organization. At the same time, it can be the weaknesses, it can include the importance of the different limits, the problem of training, capacity building conflicts. It can include the boss, because the boss is a dictator. The relations are very basic. So we need to have a global expertise within the diagnosis process, diagnostic process. To conclude my presentation, I'm going to leave you with a work that I call the macro-organizational diagnosis within the field of public interdisciplinarity. What is actually, what is this? It doesn't suffice with diagnosing the organization only of our daily activities. We need to have to organize, we have to diagnose the ensemble of the organization and administration, of bureaucracy, which is going to call the diagnostics or the macro-organizational diagnostic. We have to bring we went from the macro to the macro to the micro level to have a diagnosis and to have an expertise, a global expertise, or what is intended we want to change within the whole organization vis-a-vis public policies. This is it. And this is why I leave you with this idea. I have had images, but later we can discuss it if we still have time. Once again, next time we have a second part of the conference, which is something that has other principles, but next time around I'll be able to show you, because now I